You are listening to the Nirvana podcast, episode 9, When Grunge Broke. Hello everybody and welcome to the Nirvana podcast. My name is Sietse.
And I'm Juditja.
And what we do here is we make a journey through the history and the music of Nirvana, the rock band. And last time we had a double episode about the Nevermind album. So we focused a bit more on the music. And I think this time we're going to dive a bit more into the stories and the history around that time, early 1990s. So I think we're going to pick up our story right after the band finished recording the Nevermind album. It hadn't been released yet. They worked on it through May of 1991. After that, there was a bit of a strange period. So they were still basically an unknown band. But looking back at it, we already know that soon everything would change and the whole world would get to know them. So I think it's interesting to look back at it now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Absolutely. And what's also interesting is the fact that they recorded, like you said, in May and I think sort of the beginning of June as well. It took a bit of time before the album came out, but they actually did go on tour, which is also interesting, but slightly weird because they would also already do new material. But since the new record wasn't out yet, the audience would know their old songs, wouldn't know their new songs yet. So it's touring when your album isn't released yet is also like a weird way of gaining a new audience.
Yeah, you're right. There's just like a weird in-between period in June, July and August of 1991. In June and July, they didn't do that much, I think. They did a couple of gigs. And I think apart from that, the most notable thing that happened is that Kurt Cobain got kicked out of his house.
Oh yeah, it's true. Forgot about that story, but
yeah, which I think later added to the legend that he was like a homeless person and a bum, you know.
Exactly, sleeping under that bridge.
yeah. I think most of the time he slept with friends. Maybe he spent a few nights in his car. It's possible, but that's as far as it goes. And then in August and they went on tour with Sonic Youth, their heroes and their label and management mates by now.
Yep.
Sonic Youth just asked them to come along to Europe because, well, they liked Nirvana a lot. I think the cool thing about that is that it's been documented pretty well because they also invited a friend of theirs to come along with a Video 8 camera to shoot some images and maybe release it as like a touring movie, which probably wouldn't have attracted that much attention. But since Nirvana would take over the world pretty soon after that, it got a lot of attention. Yeah. If
you don't know about that documentary or haven't seen it, it's called 1991, The Year Punk Broke. It's quite widely available. And if you're interested in well, not just Nirvana, but seeing a lot of bands on tour, getting to know not just their music and the people in there, but also sort of a glimpse of what tour life can be, and especially on festivals. It's a great documentary to watch.
Yeah, check it out. I know some of it is on YouTube. I don't know if the whole documentary is on YouTube, but you can.
No, not sure.
You can find some clips of it for sure.
Yep, and it's out on DVD as well, so you can buy it on DVD.
It's really chaotic, and that's the way the bands were, and that's also the way the movie turned out. So that's really cool. I was looking at an interview the other day with the maker of the documentary and some of the members of Sonic Youth, and in it they said that they immediately saw that Nirvana really stepped up their game. They had seen them play before, but they recognized that now they were at another level. And they mostly credited Dave Grohl for it.
Wow. It's interesting.
The impression I get from the movie is that they were drunk a lot of the times, but also that they had a lot of fun and the atmosphere was really, really great. And I think Nirvana was in a really good place at that moment.
Yeah, definitely. It feels like they were relaxed and having fun, and also the fact that, I mean, playing with Sonic Youth, and obviously Dinosaur Jr. was there as well, because they played with Dinosaur Jr. before in the USA as well, I think, just before they went to Europe.
Yeah.
A couple of other bands, just hanging out with friends and musicians and enjoying the festival atmosphere as well. And it also captured them not just before they got really big, but also just before, and we'll talk about that later this episode, I think, just before the touring became really tiresome and really taking a toll on Nirvana and also the other bands, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, at this point it was still fun.
Yeah.
I've lined up an audio clip from the documentary in which Kim Gordon, I think, is singing Negative Creep, the Nirvana song. Mm-hmm. And, well, let's have a listen to it first and then we can talk a bit about it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's about enough. We're not playing it because it's such a great version of the song, but I wanted to highlight it because it shows that they were in it together. It wasn't like Sonic Youth was the big band. Well, they were, but they didn't act like it. I mean, they were really treating each other as equals and, participating in each other's show. There's a scene in the documentary in which Thurston Moore, the singer of Sonic Youth, pulls out Kurt from the audience after he did a stage dive, stuff like that. They were really looking after each other.
They always watched each other's sets, I think, and gave feedback on that and just basically take care of them. So that's good. If for people who are interested in Sonic Youth and well, this period, but also more like that, Kim Gordon actually wrote a autobiography a couple of years ago, which I can really recommend because it gives really a great insight in well, not just the band and her as a person, but in general, the whole atmosphere of that era as well. So do go and look for that if you're interested. I think it's called Girl in a Band. Sorry, not sure. Something like that is the title.
Okay, that sounds
Google
cool.
it.
I haven't read it. I must admit, but maybe I will.
We'll put the title and the link on the Facebook page as soon as I've can rectify if I have the title right.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you think, "Ooh, there's a Facebook page," yes, there is. It's facebook.com/Nirvana podcast, and you can give us the thumbs up to stay up to date, and also send us a message if you like. If you have a question or a request or a comment or whatever, we always like to interact with our listeners. And one more warning about this podcast. Like I said last time, we discussed the Nevermind album, and then we had really good, clean, well-produced clips of the songs. You won't find those in this podcast because it's more about live performances and rarities and strange things that happened on the road. So buckle up for some crappy audio quality.
Yeah, but that makes it fun.
Yeah. And like I said, well, if you want, if you just want to hear us talk about the really well produced music, just go back to the podcast we've made about the Nevermind album. We've also did a double podcast about the Bleach album. I think in the end we will discuss every Nirvana album in a double show. So stay tuned. Speaking of crappy audio, I've got another one ready for you guys. This is from that same tour. Nirvana had started playing Molly's Lips, a song from the Vaselines, a band Kurt absolutely adored, live. And they had a chance to sing it together with Eugene Kelly, who's from the Vaselines. And in one show, he actually joined Nirvana on stage to sing the song. And Kurt later described this moment as one of the happiest moments in his life. So despite the poor audio quality, I think we should have a listen to it. So I think it's safe to say that these were pretty happy times for the band. And I think one of their absolute highlights was their performance at the Reading Festival. I think that show at the Reading Festival was like the foreshadowing of Nirvana mania that was about to happen.
Yep.
Well, they were there in the slipstream of Sonic Youth and the other bands on the tour. They played on a pretty big stage, but I think early in the afternoon, something like that. They didn't have the best slot to play in, but the crowd absolutely adored them.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also interesting because if you hear us talk about Reading now, Reading's like one of the biggest outdoor festivals in the UK. And they played there again the year after, which is legendary as well and released on DVD and whatever. We'll get to that later. So don't confuse the two. It's Reading 91 and there's Reading 92 as well. There's obviously, like you said, there's a difference because by that time they'd become a really huge band. And this was the moment where it just started to take off. So yeah, it's a great performance of the band. You feel it's the band that we're getting to know after the release and the success of Nevermind, but still with that sort of loose, happy-go-lucky feeling of enjoying an audience that enjoys what they are doing.
Yeah, and it's weird to think that this was basically like the last moment in which Smells Like Teen Spirit was just another one of their songs. So I have two clips from the Reading performance lined up, and it's up to you to choose. They did a really weird, funny part of the end, the song of the Doors. Or we could listen to the end of their performance, which was the song Endless Nameless, in which Kurt eventually dived into the drum set, which became a pretty famous image and moment.
Exactly.
So it's up to you. Do you want to listen to Endless Nameless or the end?
Let's go for the end, just because it's weird.
My only friend, the end. This is the end. My only friend, the end.
Yeah. What can we say about it?
I think it's interesting that he obviously tries to mimic James Morrison's sound, and later on he probably did that again at the Peel sessions, but with Morrissey from the Smiths, because there he also tries that's a singer who also has like a deep dramatic voice, and you hear him trying to mimic that as well. So for some reason, I think Kurt was having fun with trying to mimic the sounds of other singers, and this sounds a bit like, well, a joke, obviously, but yeah.
Yeah, they a couple of months later in Belgium, they would do this, quote unquote, cover version as well, and then Krishna Vaselnik did the spoken word part from the song. Starting off with the killer woke up in Belgium and he put a lot of syrup on his waffles. Yeah, go look it up on YouTube. It's really funny. So after they did the Reading Festival, they moved over to the mainland of Europe, and then they showed up in the Netherlands again.
Yes.
Well, we're both Dutch, and one of our things in this show is that we try to take as much credit for our country, for the legend of Nirvana as we can. So
exactly.
Yeah, we like to stress a bit that the Dutch had their influence. This was a really weird show. They went to Rotterdam, to De Doelen, and there was a festival going on there, Ein Abend in Wien. I don't know why it was called that. It wasn't in Wien, it was in Rotterdam.
No, it was, I can explain a bit about that. I have actually, I'll put a picture of it on the Facebook as well, but I have the official CD that was made back then for the festival as a promotion thingy.
Okay.
Because this was a festival that was devised by a couple of big festival organizers in the Netherlands to try and make a combination between music, spoken word, poetry, theater, stuff like that. It was only done once, and De Doelen, the place where it was in Rotterdam, has like different rooms, different venues. So they did this for 2 days, and they had a big lineup in different rooms. So it had like the festival atmosphere, and the whole thing of the name was that they just wanted it to make it feel like special and sort of obscure. So the rooms had like the rooms had like Austrian and German names as well and stuff like that. And they only did this once, but it was sort of the test version for what would later become our Lowlands Festival, which is in fact like the biggest festival in the Netherlands since 1993, with also not just music, but poetry, theater, spoken word, stuff like that. So this was sort of a tryout for that, I guess. And back then it was pretty heavily advertised, especially by Oor, which is our music magazine. So that's where the CD came from. That was like a promotion. So Oor came with the CD, which had a lot of the bands that would be playing at An Abend in Wien on it. Interestingly enough, there's like... No, exactly. That was what I was about to say. There's 18 tracks on here by 18 different artists, and Nirvana isn't one of them. Sonic Youth isn't either. Dinosaur Jr. is on here. Some other 3D Johnston is on there. British bands like Jesus Jones and the Wonder Stuff, NWA. Interestingly enough, so really eclectic. I don't know why Nirvana isn't on here. They were sort of known here as well.
But the last time they were in the Netherlands and performed here, they didn't make a very good impression. So I think
that's true.
Most people weren't that excited about them. So that's probably why.
Could be.
Please tell our listeners how they can win this unique CD.
They cannot win it because I'm really proud to still own it.
Okay. But if you offer a lot of money, you're probably willing to sell it, right? Maybe. So I'm sorry.
It's really interesting. Yeah, no, it's fun. I didn't get to go there, unfortunately. I would have loved to, but like you said, it was a kind of a weird festival, and also the different rooms and the fact that they combined different art forms was problematic as well, because by the time that Nirvana had to play, there was actually one of my other musical heroes, Nick Cave, was there as well, and he didn't perform, but he did a poetry reading. Which was obviously not that loud because it was just him and the microphone. And Nirvana couldn't start playing in the other room because they would have drowned out the sound of Nick Cave reading his work in the other room, which is kind of funny because Nick Cave, especially during that time, if he'd been there with a band, he would probably have drowned out Nirvana. But unfortunately, he was just there. And apparently Nirvana got really tired of waiting and did start to play earlier than Nick Cave was finished. I don't know what happened. There's no stories about them getting into a fight later on, so I think that sort of went okay.
But there are a lot of other stories surrounding that performance.
Exactly.
First, just to get an impression about what at least Dave Grohl and Chris Novoselic were doing backstage. Let's listen to a bit of audio from that.
Yes.
There's ice for everyone. You don't find ice in Holland. I love my ice. Then I'll drink the beer. But no, I'll share the beer. And I'll share the wine. Would you like to have a glass of wine? I would love to have your wine. Oh, the potato chips. I will eat the chips. There are 3 flavors. I'll eat them all. And a box of juice. Would you like some? Your juice is doing something for me. I will shake the juice till it bursts.
Yeah, they were really drunk, I think, and really, well, you could call it funny, you could call it annoying. There's stories from other bands who were there that weren't too happy because they tried to steal beer from their dressing room, and I believe Dave fell over, and then he accused of somebody tripping him, and then they were pretty annoying, and it had its its influence on the show. It was more a bit of performance art than a rock show, I think.
Yeah.
Kurt had found those white.
Fit the team.
Yeah. Kurt found those white doctor's coats backstage and decided to wear one of those. Yep. So it looked a bit weird, and the show itself was really chaotic. Some of the footage ended up in the video clip for Lithium. So maybe people have seen that. You can, of course, you can find it on YouTube and look for the footage in which Kurt wears a white doctor's coat. At one point, he's banging his head against the amplifiers, and it's really, really intense and chaotic.
They weren't on stage until 11:30 at night, so they would have had plenty of time before that to basically drink and trash stuff already. Yeah.
And apparently they did. So let's listen to how that sounded. This is a weird moment from the show. I think Kurt's guitar broke down during About a Girl, and this is how they fixed it. Yeah, I think that says something about how the show went down. I must say, I do like the moment where the guitar comes back in and he launches into the solo. But apart from that, I think nobody would have believed it if you had said that, well, within a couple of months, this will be the biggest band in the world.
No.
So, pretty soon after that, a little over a week, we had the release of the Smells Like Teen Spirit single. They had already recorded the video, I think 2 or 3 weeks earlier.
But the video didn't come out until I think just after the single, because it first it debuted on the radios, but it wasn't until the video came out that it really took flight, and there was some time in between, because the video had its own premiere on MTV. So
so it still wasn't a big event. It was still the things were moving, and the momentum was building, you could say, looking back at it. But it wasn't a big deal, the release of the single. In fact, as we said earlier, people never expected this song to be the big hit. It was more like the first introduction, and then they would follow it up with Come As You Are, and that would maybe become a bigger success and help them reach a broader audience. But on September the 10th, the Smells Like Teen Spirit single got released. 3 days later, they had a record release party for Nevermind, which was... Okay, here's the thing with this podcast. There are so many stories. I mean, we could talk about the recording of the Smells Like Teen Spirit video for 10 minutes. The record release party is another by now famous story, as they got kicked out of their own party.
Exactly. And maybe it's at least it's interesting to note, because I don't think that everybody realizes that usually if you have a record release party, it's about the record, not about the band. So that means that what you do is you gather people to listen to the actual record together. So at a record release party, the band doesn't play. They might, in this case, they didn't. Sometimes they might do one song or whatever, but it's all about the record, which is already kind of awkward, just going into a room with a lot of people from the record companies and radios and whatever, and just collectively listening to your own record. And especially for a band like Nirvana, who loved doing live shows. So you can imagine that would already be quite awkward for them. Sort of I won't say that's the only reason why they misbehaved, but it didn't help.
No, they in the end, they finally convinced the DJ to stop playing Nevermind and start playing some disco tunes. They started a food fight, and then eventually they were asked to leave the party. And I think the rest of the night they ended up with some friends misbehaving over there, but it was quite an event. In a way, you could say that just a couple of days later, there was more of a record release party that they would have liked, because they were asked to do a show in a record store called the Beehive, and I think this is I think this is an important moment, because later Kurt and I think the other members of the band also said that during this show they first realized that they could become a lot bigger than they expected to. And things were getting a bit crazy already, because they thought maybe 50 kids would show up for the to see the performance, but then over 200 people showed up. People ripped posters off the wall just so they had a piece of paper that the band could sign. Kurt was asked to sign something by two guys he went to school with. He felt really, really awkward about that. So this was like their first moment in which they thought, wow, this is actually going somewhere, and things are getting a bit out of hand, and it might become a bit out of our control, I think.
Yeah, and don't forget that by playing in a record store, like usually record store performances are for smaller bands because also the audience is really close to you. If you compare that to the Reading Festival or whatever, where you have a bigger audience, but they're not that close to you, they're pretty far away, so you don't feel it the same way as that you would be in a record store getting mobbed by 200 kids who are actually like at 20 centimeters distance from you, and like you said, like ripping stuff from you and whatever.
Yeah. I think they later also said that it was like the turning point that they realized that they were no longer part of that crowd. They were actually idolized by that crowd a bit more.
Yeah,
and that felt uncomfortable for them as well because they always felt like peers, like one of them.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden that changed. I think the scene where they came from, they probably weren't asked to sign autographs at all because it wasn't
No.
a cool thing to do. And you didn't
Exactly.
idolize anybody. Everybody was more or less equal. So let's listen to Nirvana play at the Beehive record store in Seattle. Here's a bit from Something in a Way.
It's okay to eat fish, 'cause they don't have any feelings.
We talked about this song extensively in our previous episode, and I think it's I like the fact how you can still evoke that feeling that's on the record in this live version, even though it's obviously different and probably difficult to play like this as well, especially in a record store like that. But it does have that same sort of feeling, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, I like it as well. And from this point on, it was basically just one big streak of touring for the band.
Yeah.
First, they toured North America. A lot of stuff happened there as well. In October, they had a very famous incident with the bouncer. This is also
Right. Yeah.
it's very notable on YouTube, in which Kurt jumped into the audience during Love Buzz, and then a bouncer or security guy, in Kurt's words, he said that he pretended to try to rescue him and help him get back on stage, but secretly he was pulling his hair or punching him, something like that. And then Kurt took his guitar and smashed him right in the face. And then that guy, he started beating up Kurt, and then you see in a pretty heroic shot, you see Dave Grohl jumping off his drum set to help his singer out, and then I believe the bouncer had to go to the hospital, but then he came back and wanted to get his revenge on the band, and they had to make their getaway in a taxi. So it were really crazy times, I think, for the band.
Yeah, lot of fighting going on there.
Yeah, so things were getting more and more out of hand, I think.
And they during that time, like we said, the Teen Spirit video was released, and that slowly became like a really big success. Like you said, we can't discuss everything. Maybe we'll get to discussing video clips sometime in the future, more in depth. But what was clear was that really helped the song. I think it's interesting that like you read interviews with people involved in that who say like, yeah, the song wasn't made by the video because the song was great on its own as well. And I totally agree. But especially during those times, having a video clip that was interesting or stood out helped people to listen to the song as well. So that really creeped up in the charts over the world, basically, which was weird for the band, I think, because they were getting more and more popular and they sort of realized it, but then again, at the same time, they didn't because they were touring. But I think Kurt said it in one of the interviews, like then getting into a different hotel room and turning on the TV and just basically all of a sudden seeing your own music video repeated everywhere was sort of a weird moment to realize, like, okay, this is like we're touring and we're tired and whatever, but this is happening, I guess.
And apparently the first time Kurt saw his own video on TV, he was really happy about it. I believe he called his mom and he said, "Look, it's me. Hey, it's me again," which was pretty funny. Later, I think he felt awkward about it, especially because MTV wasn't too keen on playing it at first, but then they put it into heavy rotation, so it was on and on. They kept on playing it. And also, don't forget, like you said, the video was really important to promote the single, and Kurt didn't just write the music and the lyrics and stuff like that. He also came up with the concept for the video.
Yep.
He actually made some changes in the way it was edited. I've read that he really wanted to add that last shot of his face at the end, which I think was like a really good move to help people, to help build his image and to help people actually recognize him and the band and what they were. I mean, it's not just a guy
image with hair in front of his face, but an actual person with feelings. And I mean,
Yeah, and then during the end towards the end of September, the album got released and started climbing up the charts. They didn't have enough, so it went too fast to actually get their promotion started, I think. So the album got released and the promotion campaign wasn't in full gear yet, but it already started to sell out because they didn't have enough albums, because they didn't expect to sell that many. So there was something that was happening. So they were slowly climbing up the charts, but that wasn't because their popularity started to grow slowly. That was because their popularity started to grow so fast that they couldn't actually provide enough albums for the demand that was there.
No, it just exploded.
But they were touring, and I think while they were still in the United States, they probably could still, understand what was happening, because it wasn't that big just yet, and they were still in touch because they were in their own country. But then they moved back over to the UK, and I think that's where things really got weird, because they were in a different country. They were playing relatively small venues, while at the same moment in their home country they were becoming superstars. So that was really, really strange, I think.
And that was slowly happening in Europe as well. But their European, like if you look at their European tour schedule, it was grueling. Not just the amount of dates, but also I think the something that people from the US don't realize is like Europe is different countries. So traveling between different countries in Europe might be like the same distance as traveling between different states in the US. But the differences are bigger, mainly also because the languages are different.
The currencies
which
are different.
Can be
Of work are
exactly.
different.
So yeah, definitely. So there's big differences when you go from one city to another in Europe. And you can see if you look at their tour schedule that like they started in the UK, then went to mainland Europe, but then went back to the UK again, went back to mainland Europe again. It's definitely a schedule that would drive you crazy because you have no idea anymore where you are. All of those countries are foreign to you. The languages are mostly foreign to you.
There's pretty big cultural differences.
Exactly, big cultural differences. But at the same time, they were getting bigger and bigger in Europe as well. So there was, like you said, smaller venues, but more and more people showing up. Lots of interviews they had to do. Lots of like radio and TV stuff. It sounds like that whole idea of like the tour schedule sounds like the sort of tour schedule that you'd have like, oh, we're a small band and we want to do everything because we want to be bigger. But then because they were already becoming bigger, they still had to say yes to everything.
Well, it was already booked, so
exactly.
they probably felt that they had to do it.
Definitely, and they were in demand. So, I mean, you're not going to say no because you're big enough already. I mean, they did skip some stuff, but I mean, it's sort of a horrible place to be in between and a great place at the same time. So you can imagine that it took its toll on them as well.
Yeah, and it definitely did. So you already mentioned that they did radio and TV performances in Europe. Let's check out a couple of them. First, they did a John Peel session, which was actually their third for the BBC radio. Interestingly enough, they didn't just play songs from Nevermind, their new album that they were promoting. They come up with an entirely new song that is called Dump. And I suppose everybody knows it from either the Euro album or the Unplugged album. But at this moment, it hadn't been released yet. I don't know why they choose to do it, but it does make an interesting listen because it's an early version.
My heart is broke, but I have some glue. Help me in hell, mend it with you. We'll float around, hang out on clouds, then we'll come down, have a hangover, have a hangover, have a hangover, have a hangover. Skim the sun, fall asleep. Wish away.
So anything you'd like to say about these sessions?
Well, I find it interesting that listening to this, it doesn't sound as bad as some of the other sessions, and also I know that they
Stay tuned for another session
Exactly.
that doesn't sound as good.
No, like you mentioned, this is like the third time they were at the John Peel sessions, radio sessions that are like famous all over the world, and a lot of them have been released as well. A really important place to be for bands. They done two great ones, and I've read that like the whole team of the Peel sessions really had a hard time with this third one because it didn't go as well as planned, and Kurt was not really responsive and whatever. And then you listen to this one, it's like, it's not. It's sort of okay-ish, no. And also, I think that maybe because this was a new song, it might have sounded like undefinable to the John Peel guys, I can imagine. But now
maybe the band itself
hearing it,
wasn't used to playing it just yet. They didn't really
Exactly,
have it
yeah.
all figured out.
No.
But it does sound pretty good. By the way, there's an interesting book about this period in the history of Nirvana called Nirvana, a Tour Diary. It's written by a guy called Andy Bollen. And back in the day, he was the drummer for a band called Captain America. It's a very well-written and funny book. He kept a diary while they were touring together because Captain America was the new band from Eugene Kelly from the Vaselines, who we heard in the beginning of the podcast. And Nirvana invited them to be their support act. Andy Bollen basically describes it as that he got to be the drummer for the band pretty much by accident. But he was hanging out with Kurt in the dressing room, and they both kept a diary. So, that they bonded over that, I suppose.
Yep.
And it gives an interesting insight in what went on behind the scenes. One of the things he says is that sometimes people have the impression that Nirvana wasn't really into it, and they were cranky all the time and grumpy, and by this time, a lot of the fun they had in the beginning may have disappeared a bit, but they were really devoted to their fans. I mean, Kurt was having health problems. He had a lot of problems with his stomach. He had problems with his voice, but he was really he really insisted on doing the shows because he didn't want to let the fans down. At one point, a doctor told him to stop performing because he was ruining his voice, but he still kept on doing it for a long time. And also he describes the craziness that was starting to build around the band. So if you want to read more about that, check out that book, Nirvana, a Tour Diary. By the way,
put it on Facebook as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yep.
We're gonna our Facebook social media team.
Yep.
Got a lot of stuff to do. I also wanted to say that perhaps people know pictures of Kurt wearing a Captain America t-shirt. That's not because he was a fan of the comic character Captain America. That most people will know now, probably because of the Marvel movies that became really popular. But he was referring to the band, and Kurt knew that he had a bigger audience now, and that one day they had a photo shoot, so he intentionally wore that T-shirt to promote his friends in another band. So that was pretty cool.
Exactly. Yeah, he did that quite often, the rest of the band as well, because they had this feeling like, okay, we're really big now, but there's a lot of bands and friends out there who are just as good as we are, and they deserve a bit of attention as well. So they really had this period of wearing lots of shirts from other bands to just try and get them across as well and help their sales. So not just being nice to their own fans, but also being nice to their colleagues, which I think is great.
Yeah, absolutely. One funny thing that Andy Bollen writes in this book is that he was in touch with his mom, and there were already a lot of rumors flying around about Nirvana, and especially Kurt Cobain with his drug problems and whatnot. And then Andy said to his mother, well, they're actually really nice, polite, funny guys. You would like them. And then they did their first TV performance in the UK on a show called The World. And then Kurt decided to introduce Smells Like Teen Spirit in a very special way. Here's what he said.
Yep.
I'd like all of you people in this room to know that Courtney Love, the lead singer of the sensational pop group Hole, is the best fuck in the world.
So that became a thing, right? That moved him over from like the music press to the tabloids, and there was some outrage, I believe, about this.
Yep. especially in the UK, things like this are regarded even worse than in a lot of other countries for some reason. So they like being outraged about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and there's also a weird story behind this, because a couple of months before, Kurt had met this girl, Mary Lou Lord, in Boston when they were touring there, and she more or less became his girlfriend. It kind of depends on whose story you're listening to, but they hung out together, that's for sure, and she actually flew to the UK to be with him, so there was some serious stuff going on, and she hardly knew about the existence of some Courtney Love, and then she saw him say this on TV, and that really, it was a slap in her face, of course. So,
that's a shame.
It was really, it was a dick move. Let's be honest about that.
Yeah, definitely. And the whole, I like you said, the stories are sort of unclear, especially the whole thing with Courtney Love. I mean, it took some time before it really took off between them. They'd met a couple of times already, so you can imagine that it was sort of unclear, but yeah, you shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, that's for sure. And also, I think the reason that a lot of those stories are unclear is because they've told a lot of different versions of the story themselves, especially Courtney Love, who has, I think, mentioned several years and dates on which she met Kurt, and the whole timeline is a bit fuzzy because of that. Yep. But it's for sure that they had met before. I think around this period, Courtney Love just broke up with Billy Corgan, the lead singer from the Smashing Pumpkins.
Smashing Pumpkins, yeah.
Yeah, and then she hooked up with Kurt Cobain, and it's I think it's difficult to talk about Courtney Love because she's such a controversial figure, and there's so many stories and rumors and lies flying around. A lot of them, she started herself, but a lot
just in true Kurt fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. Kurt was known for telling stories and lies very easily as well. Exactly. But then again, there's a lot of people who really hate Courtney Love, and so I think they used the same tactics to put her down. Yep. So it's really, really hard to differentiate the facts from the myth and the lies and the stories.
Yep.
But,
definitely. So we'll not get into all of those details because I think they've been discussed enough from lots of sides, from the the positive and the negative sides. But yeah, it's what's clear is that during this period, they met several times, on and off, whatever, until they were definitely a couple. But we'll get to that later.
Yeah, that was around this period. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah. So let's move back to our favorite country, the Netherlands, because that's where Nirvana went next for a show and a radio session. This is and this is one of those sessions that went really, really bad. I think the guys from the session were really happy to have Nirvana because they were like the next big thing.
We talked about that before. They had done a previous session in the Netherlands when they were there years before, which went pretty well. And this time they took it bigger. There were multiple broadcasters involved in doing this session, the broadcasters from before and new ones. So this was going to be bigger and better. And they really had this feeling like, oh yeah, this is going to be legendary. So they put a lot of time and effort in there. And apparently the presenter had made like a wish list of songs that he hoped they would play, and they just threw it out. Yeah, which didn't help.
Yeah, I heard that they were at least asked to play at least something of the Nevermind album, but they didn't feel like it. They came in, I think, really exhausted and
Yeah.
without any inspiration or energy or motivation to make something of it.
This was already like the end of November or something like that, so they would have been really tired already.
It was November the 25th.
Just
checked it out, looked it up in my notes. And you can really hear that they were just screwing around. Let's listen to two things. One of them screwing around and one of their sort of okay takes. So here we go.
I was born in Virginia, and my mother's name is Virginia. What's that? But she was born in Pennsylvania, so there ain't no connection. But she ain't no vampire, 'cause she wasn't born in...
I mean, imagine those guys that were all excited to get Nirvana in the studio to do a session with them. And like the whole idea of the format was that people do like stripped down versions. It was like an unplugged concept. And then the band shows up and did this. I mean, it's pretty horrible.
Yep.
I think here's another story about the 2 meter sessions. Years and years later, Dave Grohl came back to the same program with the Foo Fighters, and then they had on their list of equipment that they needed, they had put on a mellotron, which is a really obscure instrument.
Yep.
The Beatles used it famously for the intro of Strawberry Fields. So it's a really obscure instrument, and it goes out of tune really fast, and there aren't a lot of them around. So the production, they had to put a lot of effort in getting a mellotron in the studio. Then the Foo Fighters showed up and they said, what's that? And the guy from production said, it's a mellotron, you needed it. And they said, well, we always put it on there. We never get it. Wow, this is really cool. Let's see who can play it. And so they just had to figure out how to play a mellotron on the spot. I think they did use it, but I don't think the guys from the VPRO 2 meter sessies are that big of fans.
No.
So want to listen to Where Did You Sleep Last Night as well from the same sessions?
Yeah. Yep, cool.
Don't lie to me. Tell me, where did you sleep last night? In the pines, where the sun never shines. I will shiver the whole night through.
So I think this is the best take that came out of the sessions. But I can imagine that the guys from the studio were really disappointed by it.
Yeah. This is this still sounds like as if you're listening to like a high school band, and you're like, yeah, there's some music in there. It's not bad, but I'm not sure yet if they're really good. That's sort of the way this sounds.
And of course, later they did this song to close off their MTV Unplugged sessions, and it became like a legendary song on their repertoire. But at this point, they were just singing a pretty unknown blues song instead of one of their popular songs of their album. It didn't make a lot of sense.
And also a song that for us in the Netherlands, like people in the US and perhaps the UK, there might be more people who know that that song already, but over here we wouldn't have any idea what they were playing. So
now we know it because of the Unplugged album. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the best thing that came out of these sessions is that famous picture. There's this black and white picture of Kurt with his headphones and an acoustic guitar.
Yep.
That's really good. But that's better than the actually audio recordings.
Yeah,
in fact,
I think they had like 45 minutes of recording and only about 15 to 20 minutes that's sort of usable. So yeah.
I think it was even less that was usable. They did Where Did You Sleep Last Night, and they did Here She Comes Now, and they screwed around a bit, and I think that was it.
Yeah.
In fact, the photographer was so underwhelmed by the band that he decided not to go to Nirvana playing at the Paradiso venue that night.
Yep.
I believe instead he went to the Ramones. Not 100% sure.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not 100% sure. But then the Paradiso gig became legendary, especially in the Netherlands, because then there was a whole different atmosphere and a completely different band on stage, which was actually the same evening.
Yep. Yeah, that's still amazing to think that was the same day. Just goes to show that sometimes playing live can give you some adrenaline that you didn't have before that, I guess.
Yeah, true. And also there are some speculations that they use some chemicals to revive themselves for that show. But that show is it's a really really good show. It's been recorded. I'm still expecting this to be like an official release, because there was a camera on stage, which, by the way, Kurt tried to push off at one point. The cameraman and the camera both at the same time. But so I'm thinking there must be a professional audio recording of this. It's been bootlegged.
Yeah.
So I still think that sooner or later we might find this to be released officially, which would be really cool if they, polish the audio a bit and put it out. But we can still listen to it. So I have two songs lined up. First, it's Comme Tu Es, in which Kurt, his guitar is really out of tune, and his motto seemed to be, if your guitar is out of tune, then sing even more out of tune. I think he wanted that as a caption on the video. Or on a plane, which actually sounds pretty good. So it's up to you. Do you want something obscure and funny, or do you want just a rendition of On a Plane?
Keeping in line with the entire episode, I'd say obscure and funny.
Okay, here we go.
Yep.
Come as you are, as you were, as I want you to be, as a friend, as I love and me. Take your time, hurry up, just
Okay, I think that's enough.
Yeah, that's enough.
Yeah, but believe us, dear listeners, it was actually a really good show. You can already see that there was a hype around the band because everybody wanted to get in, and they were in a way too small venue for the status they had at that point.
Yeah, and they'd already been rebooked, because this should have been at the Melkweg where they played previously when they were in the Netherlands. That was already too small, so it was it went to the Paradiso, which is great because it's a more beautiful building as well. So that's good for the pictures and the videos.
We watched soccer there once together, remember?
Right, that's true. Yeah.
I think it was the World Cup 2014, something like that. Yeah, but they had a
that's
big
true.
screen on stage, but it's
nice.
It's an old church for people who don't know it, and it's I think it's one of the best known concert halls from the Netherlands, and it's absolutely beautiful. So if you have the opportunity, go and visit the Paradiso. That is, if the coronavirus isn't around anymore. Right.
Exactly.
So then Nirvana crossed back over to the UK to do some more shows and some TV performances. Here's another legendary one, and also obscure and funny. They were booked to play the Top of the Pops, which is like the big music show from in the UK, and it had like a really big impact, I suppose. But
definitely.
The band was really annoyed that they weren't allowed to play live. I think first they were told to lip sync the whole thing. They refused, and then the compromise was that Kurt would do his vocals live, but the instrumental track was pre-recorded, and so they took the opportunity to mess around with the vocals and also with their performance. I mean, it's hilarious if you watch it. Again, it's on YouTube.
And they made it abundantly clear that they were not actually playing their instruments live.
Yeah.
When you watch it, you can see them doing really bad playbacking with their guitars and whatever.
And
really
waving
funny.
at it. And well, on top of that, Kurt decided to change up the vocals a bit, and the lyrics as well, by the way. I think he's singing the lyrics that were printed in some magazine by somebody who didn't really got it right. Because at this point, Smells Like Teen Spirit was the big song, but the whole mystery was what are the actual lyrics. So people were guessing. Somebody guessed it wrong, and Kurt decided to use those lyrics in a very special rendition of Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Having sold over 1 million records in 6 weeks, they're straight in at number 9. Here's Nirvana with Smells Like Teen Spirit.
The clapping of the audience is also really stupid, by the way.
I hate that. That's horrible.
Load up on drugs, kill your friends as fun means to them. She's overjoyed, self-assured, and all I know to
This is what I said before about the end, like the Jim Morrison sound. He's renditioning that here again, and also having that bit of Morrissey in there, the way he's singing.
It's hilarious. It cracks me up every time. And it also shows that, they were maybe a bit rebellious, but they had a sense of humor as well.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, a lot of people tend to overlook that because they were also really about frustration and negativity and stuff like that. But they knew how to have a good time and have fun with things as well. Yeah. Which was also proven on their next TV performance in the UK on the Jonathan Ross show. I don't know that show. Do you? Anything about it?
Yeah. It's been. Is it still going? I'm not sure. If you're from the UK, let us know. I know it was a couple of years ago. It's basically a lighthearted entertainment talk show with guests and also some music.
Yeah, and Nirvana was invited to perform. I think they were supposed to play Lithium. I think. Mm-hmm. Or maybe
I think so.
Well, maybe even Smells Like Teen. At least one of their singles. But without any notification on forehand, they decided not to do that, but instead play their loudest and noisiest song of the album. So here's how that went down. This is so cool as well, especially at the end. They just trash all their gear and walk off and leave everybody totally blown away by what just happened.
Yeah. And like I said, the show itself is pretty lighthearted, so this would have been a really big contrast with the rest of the show, probably. So nice.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Ross says something like, "Well, they're available for children's parties and bar mitzvahs," something like that.
Great, nice.
So I think this brings us pretty much to the end of the show and to the end of the year, 1991. But there's one more thing I think we should play, and that's their appearance on Saturday Night Live.
Back in the US.
Back in the US on January 10th of 1992, because it really, it really underlines their new status. I don't know if we as Dutchies can grasp the impact of being on Saturday Night Live, but I think it's probably the biggest stage you can be on American television, right?
It's huge, and it also gives you credibility, basically. Not that Nirvana was lacking credibility, but having that opening to the wide audience while still having sort of like the intellectual credibility that show gives you is huge.
Yeah, and it suits them, I think. Again, it didn't go all that smoothly because they refused to rehearse trashing their gear, because they were known for that, and the SNL crew really wanted to make sure that they got that right, and that it was recorded right, but they refused to do that. I think again there was some debate about playing Territorial Pissings. It's one of their songs, but they really stuck to that. But they also played their big smash hit "Smells Like Teen Spirit," and luckily they were allowed to play it completely live. So let's listen to that and talk about it just a bit more, because there's a bit more to say about this performance, and then I think we're done with this podcast.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, Nirvana.
I think that was the best performance we've played this whole podcast.
Yep.
And like I said, well, we picked out the really strange and weird things that happened in these days. But I think it also says a bit about them as a band, that when it really, really, really mattered, they knew when to step up their game and to the right way, and not to not to mess things up, which they were pretty good at.
yeah, definitely. And obviously, this performance is also noteworthy for the fact that we saw Kurt Cobain with pink hair for the first time. It's a detail, but still, it's something that a lot of people associate him with. So that was that added to the myth, I think, of seeing them live.
Yeah, and one more thing that added to the myth, I think, is that in the Nirvana biography Heavier Than Heaven, it's described that the morning of the performance, Kurt pretty much took an overdose, and that Courtney Love found him lying on the floor of their hotel room more dead than alive. Although there are, again, some serious doubts about this story.
Yep.
I'm not convinced personally.
It's, without medical knowledge, it's hard to say, but having that in the morning and then playing like this in the evening sounds slightly special, say it like that. But whatever happened, something happened.
At least during this period. I mean, his drug use was spiraling out of control. They were known to have done heroin together in Amsterdam, by the way. We didn't mention that, but Kurt and Courtney saw each other here in Amsterdam. Courtney was playing a show in Nijmegen and then hitched a ride to Amsterdam so they could be together and do drugs together as well.
Yep.
So those are, I think, the two most important developments going parallel. At one side, rising to world fame, and on the other side, spiraling down in drug abuse and addiction.
Yep.
So I think that's the two things that really started to happen, and I think they both would get worse during 1992, the rest of the year.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So this really is a this Saturday Night Live show is like you said a sort of an interesting midpoint of both of those things, like being a great band, but also having those personal problems and those health problems and addictions and being happy with being successful, but also having to deal with the toll of being that big. That all sort of culminates around this period.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot more to say about that, and I think we're going to do that in the next episode of the Nirvana podcast, because we've reached the end of this one, because we're out of material, and also because my 1.5-year-old daughter just woke up.
You were playing Nirvana too loud again.
It's on my headphones. I swear. Yeah, and also it makes a nice segue into the topic of having a baby, which will come up on the next show as well.
Nice link.
but thanks. But before we're going to close off, I'd like to say thanks to Keegan and the Loud Losers from Melbourne, Australia. He's a listener of the podcast, and he wrote us an email. He writes, "Hey guys, I hope this is the right account for the Nirvana podcast." Well, it is. Our email address is surewoodpodcast@gmail.com. So I can get the confusion and the uncertainty of that. But if Keegan can do it, you can do it too. So if you want to reach out to us, send us an email. I hope this is the right account for the Nirvana podcast. Anyway, my Loud Loser would like to say thank you for the podcast that you guys do. As soon as I heard that there was a Nirvana podcast on Spotify, I instantly went and downloaded all the episodes. They are very fact-filled, and as a 15-year-old kid who is in a punk rock band, I drew inspiration from Nirvana. And when you guys did the podcast, it was amazing. My favorite episode would be Nevermind Side A, where you went through the first half of Nevermind and only played the vocal track and then just played the bass. I love that stuff. So thanks, Keegan, for reaching out to us. And it's also really cool to know that 15-year-old kids are still drawing inspiration from Nirvana.
Yeah, it's great to hear, and I'm glad that can add a bit to your Nirvana interests, and hopefully get you even more interested in that. So great.
Yeah, and he has a couple of more treats with the separated tracks coming up, because we've got some more lined up for when we discuss the In Utero album. That won't be anytime soon, I think, but we will get there eventually. So just stay tuned, and it will come up. For now, I'd like to thank you, Juditja, for joining me again.
Yeah, thank you for having me once again.
And thank everybody for listening to this podcast, and hopefully we'll talk a bit more next time. Thank you for listening, and bye.
Bye.